Okay. So before I start getting into Calico Ingress Gateway and some of the traffic management options that you have with that, I'll start with just a few housekeeping things. So this session is being recorded, and I believe a copy will get sent out probably within 24 hours after this Calico demo session. And if you do have any questions as we're going through, on the right-hand side, or at least on my right-hand side, there is a chat panel. So if you write any questions in the chat panel, I do have it open on my other monitor, so I can hopefully see and answer any questions as we go through. And then there is also a docs tab there with a link to some other resources all about Calico Ingress Gateway. So you can go and check those out as well. And at the end, I'll probably go through some of those. One of them, which is this blog. So to start with, Calico Ingress Gateway, if you haven't heard of it yet or you're new to Ingress Gateway, this is sort of newer. It's based on the Gateway API, and it's sort of built or designed, I guess, as a way to move on from the sort of traditional or ingress controllers that have been around for a while. So the goal there is to just sort of move beyond those limitations of the Ingress API and the Ingress controllers that already exist. So I think if you've already had experience with sort of Ingress controllers in Kubernetes, in order, I think, for a lot of people to get them to do what they needed them to do, it ended up resulting in a lot of sort of annotations in there to kind of customize, configure the Ingress Gateway to do exactly what you need it to do. And then again, that would, I guess, cause issues if you ended up having to use multiple ingress controllers. So if you're going from Nginx to maybe traffic, for example, all of the annotations that you might have had to put in place to get Nginx working probably wouldn't have worked when you moved over to traffic, or vice versa. So the idea of Gateway API should be a much more consistent experience across different clusters, different environments, etc. So Calico Ingress Gateway is built on top of the Gateway API, and is also using Envoy Gateway underneath. But Calico sort of gives you an easier way to enable that. It's just a few commands to kind of set that up. We'll have a look at some of the configurations that you can do for different traffic management as well. And then obviously how that integrates with Calico. So you get all of the flow logs, you get the observability. So not only are you configuring and setting up your Calico Ingress Gateway and setting up your traffic routing, you're also able to sort of visualize that, see where the traffic is going, look at flow logs, so you can actually verify and kind of see what's going on as well. So I've got some of these sort of pre-built little demos that kind of walk through, so first off, sort of enabling the Gateway API, just showing how easy that is in just a few commands, setting it up before we look at some of the traffic management options, so things like load balancing, HTTP routing, and those examples will start off with the Calico commercial editions. So that would either be Calico Cloud, which is our SaaS product offering, hosted in the cloud, which connects to your clusters. And you can also do the same with Calico Enterprise, which would be the sort of self-managed, self-hosted Calico option. But because Calico Ingress Gateway is available in both open source and the commercial options, I'll show you how you can look at sort of the flow logs and the visualizations for the Ingress Gateway traffic in open source as well at the end. So to enable Gateway API in Calico is pretty easy. And I also added a link in the docs tab in Goldcast that takes you to the Calico open source documentation. So one of those pages is a quick start for Calico, and the other one is the documentation for enabling Calico Ingress Gateway for your open source clusters. So that would walk you through these steps as well. So it's just one sort of command to enable or apply that Gateway API into your cluster. Once that's applied and that's created the Gateway API, you can just do a check of your API resources. You should start to see you've got like the gateway classes, the gateways, HTTP routes, reference grants, etc. So all of those resources then get created inside your cluster. And that's when you can start to configure them for different traffic routing options or the load balancing, which we'll be having a look at in a moment. So super easy, as you can tell, to get that started. And then once you want to sort of set up your cluster for load balancing, there are a few different load balancing options that you've got available to you. So I'll show you round robin and a random load balancing. And then the least request and the consistent hash sort of link out to the Envoy documentation. So round robin, pretty self-explanatory. If you've got traffic coming into your Calico Ingress Gateway, traffic that hits the gateway will then get distributed sort of equally to any of the backend services that are behind the gateway. With random, that will then distribute the traffic randomly. And then least request will send it to the sort of services that have received the least requests. And then consistent hash is a way that you can kind of set that up. So you could pick something like source IP, and if you sort of set that to be the hash for this load balancing policy, then if someone came in from the same laptop, so if, let's say if I was connecting to a service over the load balancer, it would always be sending me to the same backend service. Whereas if someone else with a different IP address then came in, tried to connect to it, they would then get connected or sent to a different backend endpoint or service. So I guess if you've got sticky sessions or something like that, you want to make sure that if someone's connecting to your Calico Ingress Gateway, that they're always getting sent to the same backend pods. You would have a look into consistent hash. So we'll start with round robin. So again, this is assuming that you've got the Gateway API, all those resources set up, like we just saw. And then you'll create backend policies. So these are the backend traffic policies for this round robin routes. So you can see at the top there, the top one here is a round robin policy. It's specifying the load balancer type there as round robin. And then underneath that, you've got the HTTP routes. So this is where you'd kind of give it a name, what namespace it belongs in. The parent refs here, that would be sort of going back to the Gateway API that you've already set up. And then you're defining down at the bottom here where that traffic is getting sent to. So what are the backend references? So this will get sent to a backend pod over port 3000 in this example. And that's if it matches, if something comes in to the URL with this sort of /round, then it would get sent to these backend pods here on port 3000. So once you've applied that, you can then test this out. And this is using some of the examples from the Envoy documentation. So they use this Hey tool to sort of generate a bunch of concurrent requests. So it's sending 100 requests, that's the number of requests there concurrently, so at the same time, to that host, to that example.com, was actually what was configured in here. So you can see for host names for the HTTP routes. And then it's sending it to the gateway host. So I've set that as a variable. And then it's got the /round at the end of the URL. So that means it'll get sort of processed by, handled by that round robin load balancer type. And then you can see that that was successful, 100 responses or 100 responses that were sort of 200. Okay. And then you can also run commands. They give you examples here to kind of get information from all the pods that have the backend label. So those will be targeted by the round robin load balancer policy. And it will sort of count the number of requests. So pretty much equally distributed across all 4 of the backend pods that would be handling those requests. And then this is showing Calico Cloud, so one of the commercial editions of Calico. So when Calico is installed inside your clusters, you will be collecting flow logs for everything that's going on inside your cluster. So you can see at the bottom here, we've got a lot of flow logs listed here. And then Calico uses all of those flow logs to generate a visualization, which you can see at the top, which is our service graph. So this allows you to see how different resources in your cluster are communicating. And here you can actually filter out the flow logs as well. So you don't just get a list of everything that's in your cluster. As you click around in the service graph, this will auto filter, and you can update these filters yourself. So for this flow logs table at the moment, it's been filtered, so flow logs will just show all the backend pods. So you can see here for the destination name and the destination name aggregate, that's all the backend pods here. You can see that destination port 3000, which we have set up in our HTTP routes. And you can see all of that traffic coming from the Gateway API here. So you can see the source namespace. And then you can also see that visualized here. So you've got a green line going from the Envoy Gateway system to our backend pods there, which is just showing the aggregated view. And those lines are green at the moment, so that's showing that none of the traffic is actually being denied by Calico. If you were implementing network policies and kind of securing your application, securing your Calico Ingress Gateway, and you potentially had some blocked traffic going through there, then you would start to see that line color change from green to sort of like an orangey red color. So this is a good way that you can use to sort of go and investigate your traffic, make sure that your Calico Ingress Gateway is working correctly, and just check that the traffic is going to the right backend services. So again, just like we did on the command line, you can also use the flow logs to verify the number of flows that were sent there. So because this was the round robin load balancer type, we can see the number of flows there always going to 25. So that's been equally distributed across them. And I guess now that it's zoomed in, it's a little bit harder to see, but there are 8 listed here for the backend services. It gets reported every time by the destination and the source. So if we sent 100 requests, seeing sort of 8 rows in the flow logs table would be expected, because the source and the destination are both inside the cluster and both of them are reporting on the flow logs. Yeah, you can also checking the number of flows here in the flow logs is a good way to kind of verify that your load balancer is distributing traffic correctly. And then those flow logs also power some of the dashboards that we have. So this is showing some of the dashboards in Kibana. So we used to send all of the flow logs to Elasticsearch. And then you've got the Kibana front end on top of that so that you can actually start to write more complex queries, start to build some more sort of targeted views based on what you're looking for. And then so some of the dashboards in here, you can actually get it to show as well the destination name. You've got the count of records there. So you can see that they're equally distributed. In the more recent versions of Calico Cloud, these dashboards are actually getting brought into Calico Cloud itself. So you don't have to go to Kibana anymore to build these dashboards. And you also get some of the dashboards available in sort of the free tier of Calico Cloud, which I'll show you in a little bit. And again, just on this dashboard too, you can see that the URL values are all going to that sort of round endpoint for the round robin load balancer. So very similar to the round robin, except this time we're setting the type of load balancer to random. And again, we're changing the sort of rules here in our HTTP routes to match if it's got that /random. Now they will get distributed to those same backend pods but randomly. So both of those have been created. We've got some new routes, and the round robin routes and the policies are still existing. So just depending on what URL and what endpoint that we're hitting will determine how that traffic gets distributed. So again, using that Hey tool, this time just bumping up the number of requests just to try and sort of demonstrate a random distribution, doing 100 concurrently to that same URL. And then this time it's got the /random, so it should be distributed randomly by the load balancer. And then all of those sort of requests were successful. And then again, if we run the same command here, sort of doing that get pods and sort of bringing back some of that metadata, you can see that this time the numbers are a little bit different. So we've got some that are around 232, 233 requests processed by those 2 pods. And then 2 of the other backend pods had 265 or 270 of the requests. So you can see that that distribution is a little bit more random compared to the round robin. And then again, if you wanted to go and verify in sort of the flow log service graph, you can go and do that, and you would see that in the dashboards as well. So you would see another URL pop up there with the /random, and you would see how those requests were distributed. And then for least request and consistent hash, this just takes you to the Envoy Gateway documentation. You can go and have a look at the backend traffic policy, very similar to what we saw already, HTTP routes. And again, it walks you through these examples for all of them. So if you've got Calico Ingress Gateway installed in your cluster, this is some of the documentation you can go and follow to set this up for yourself as well. And one of the other examples that we've got is the HTTP routing. So we did set up some routing rules just to basically tell the load balancer where it's sending that traffic to. But you can also use the HTTP routes to sort of configure different weightings for your backend services or backend references. So if people are sort of doing canary deployments, you're doing sort of rolling updates where you want to have most of your traffic go to one service that you know is working, but you want to maybe put a new update out there, send some of the traffic to it just to kind of test it out, make sure that it's working, and then if it's all good, you can increase the weighting of that newer service and slowly start to send more and more traffic to it. So that's where you can use these HTTP routings and put different weights on backend refs, which you can see here. So we've got the route already configured. You can see this time it's sending it not to these backend pods, but we've got some NS1, NS2. Those are the values of our path here. So this first one will actually send all the traffic to an NS1 pod or an echo server pod that in an NS1 namespace. And the other one here will send it if it's going to source slash NS2, it will send it to the echo server pod in the NS2 namespace. And both of these have a weight of 1 at the moment. So again, depending on the URL, send it to a different backend service. And then we can send a call request to it. You can see here we've got the slash NS1 sending that query. And doing this is one of the examples that we have in the Calico documentation that I've added the link to as well. And then you get the response back too, so you can actually see that it's going to that echo server NS1 here. So that's going to the right backend pod or backend service. And then again, you can test it with the NS2, so you can see the NS2 in the URL there. And then the host name that's returned is that echo server NS2. And so you can verify it on the command line, but you can also go over to Calico's service graph to have a look at that. So again, just like we saw the service graph for the load balancer examples, this is being powered by all of those flow logs, and you can see that the Envoy gateway that's been set up here is then sending that traffic. You can see the lines going out to the NS1 namespace and the NS2 namespace. And I've actually generated some traffic that kind of matches this in the cluster that I've got locally. So I can show you in Calico Open Source as well. And then just as we did before, again, you can verify all of the flows in the flow logs. You can check the number of flows. We've got one flow here going to the NS1 namespace. We've got it reported by the source and the destination. Because when you click on that line that you can see there, that's going to auto filter out your flow logs table. So let me see. So I've got the cluster set up here. So you can see there, sort of before this, I was going in and generating a lot of traffic to that. You can kind of see it in here. This one's generating to that NS2. I've got some traffic here that's going to the NS1 URL as well. So it will get redirected to both of those endpoints. And so this is Calico Cloud free tier. So if you're not a commercial customer and you wanted sort of access to the service graph, you wanted 24 hours worth of flow logs, Calico Cloud free tier, you can sign up for free. You can connect one cluster to it, and then that will still give you access to the service graph, the flow logs, and some other things as well. But for the Ingress, Calico Ingress Gateway, I can show you that the service graph is showing up here, and this is showing me the last 15 minutes of traffic. But if I change that to 15 hours, you can see that I've got a lot more things on here. And we've got the Tigera gateway from all of that traffic that I showed you on my sort of terminal going to both the NS1 and the NS2 namespace. And then if we double click on that namespace, we can see we've got the Echo Server NS2 pod. And in the NS1 namespace, we would see the Echo Server NS2. And then you've got the flow logs down here, auto filtering as well. So we can see that those, we can see all of the flows from my testing in the terminal listed here. And I did mention that Calico Cloud, the commercial edition, has more dashboards available for you here. But with the free tier, you do get access to flow logs, dashboard, traffic volume, and cluster health. So I don't think these will give you the same sort of insights that are showing you kind of in that walkthrough, because the commercial edition is sort of collecting more information. It's collecting DNS logs, it's collecting application layer logs, so sort of HTTP layer 7, which make it a bit easier to see, but you can sort of add your filters in here. Again, change the time range. You can still get some insights and kind of monitor using dashboards as well as looking at the service graph. And if you didn't want to sign up for Calico Cloud free tier, if you're happy with just having a look at flow logs, this is Calico Whisker. So with every installation of Calico 3.30, which was recently released, you get access to Calico Whisker. So this gives you sort of a UI just for the flow logs. So especially if you're sort of setting up your Calico Ingress Gateway and you want to verify that the traffic is going to the right backends, the flow logs that you can see in Whisker, you'll be able to do that. As well as if you're building network policies, you can go and verify that they're all working correctly. You can see if the traffic is being allowed or denied. And you can do some filtering in here too. So you can filter by policy, source namespace, destination namespace, ports, etc. So both this Calico Whisker and the Calico Cloud free tier that I just showed you are connected to the same cluster that I'm running locally. Calico Whisker does show 12 hours worth of logs. So the free tier shows 24 hours. This one does 12 hours. Trying to see because it keeps refreshing. I'm not sure if I'll be able to show the traffic that I ran a little while ago, but let me see if I can do the source as this envoy in here. So I guess we can just see it here. It's going to the core DNS. Destination name is the Envoy Gateway. I was hoping I would be able to find my NS1 or NS2. I don't know if this will work. Just thinking, no. So I guess if it's got the logs that are refreshing on here, they should refresh now. It will automatically sort of list you all of the things that it's generating traffic for. So we've got our Catfax namespace here. Then that would auto-populate in this list to filter by. So if I was quick, the sort of test client pod that we use here keeps refreshing. There we go. So I'd have to go and install curl again to regenerate those commands. But if I kind of run that right now and then went straight back to Whisker, you would start to see that traffic showing up in here as well that you could use to sort of verify live. So I think that's pretty much everything I wanted to show for Calico Ingress Gateway today. So just some sort of basic load balancing examples, how you can set the round robin, how you can set the random load balancing up, as well as sort of using your HTTP routes and where you can go and define the weighting for that. So they do have linked actually one sort of walkthrough or sort of self-paced lab that you can follow. So it's the introduction to Calico's Ingress Gateway. If you kind of click on that one, if you wanted to try it out for yourself, that kind of gives you a cluster set up with Calico 3.30 in there, connected to Calico Enterprise, I believe. And then you can go in, you can experience sort of setting up the Calico Ingress Gateway for yourself. And then it walks through the examples that we kind of saw today. So you'll be able to go and build your load balancer yourself, do some of the HTTP routing, and as well at the end takes you through some of the weighting options. You can play with changing the weighting around using the logs that you can kind of see in Whisker or in the service graph in the flow logs to verify that the traffic is getting weighted correctly. So feel free to pop any questions if you have any questions about Ingress Gateway in the chat. I'm not seeing any at the moment. So I'll just kind of show some of the resources that I did link. One of them is to this quick start guide. So if you haven't upgraded or had a chance to play with Calico 3.30 yet, we've got our quick start guide here, which you can just create a cluster, get up and running fairly quickly. And then if you wanted to find the instructions for sort of setting up Ingress Gateway, under the networking option in the docs, you've got configuring Ingress Gateway. And that kind of walks you through the examples that I've showed you today. So you can get that set up inside your clusters as well. And then I've also linked out to that self-paced lab that I mentioned. This sort of blog, which goes into a little bit more detail about sort of Ingress Gateway versus, or the Gateway API versus Ingress. So if you're currently sort of thinking about migrating or sort of wondering what the difference is, that's probably worth a look. So with that, we're pretty much right on time. I'll hang around for a little bit more just to keep an eye on the chat. If anybody does have any questions, feel free to write those in. But hopefully that helps. It gives you a bit of an insight into Calico Ingress Gateway and how that works really well with Calico to be able to sort of look at the network logs, the flow logs, visualize it, as well as just sort of setting it up and hoping that it's working. So just to finish off, I am going to launch a survey. If you wouldn't mind filling it out, that would be appreciated, just to kind of get some insights or feedback if this was kind of what you're expecting from the session, what you would prefer to see, what kind of challenges that you're facing. So I'll launch that now. So yeah, I'll probably turn my screen sharing off. If you have any questions, put them in the chat. I'll stick around to watch, and thank you in advance for filling out the survey, and thanks for coming.